The battle lines are clear. Moisture is on your side. Evaporation is not. Keeping adequate moisture in the areas of most wear around the pitcher's mound and home plate is critical to reducing wear. You'll often see tarps covering these areas. These weren't necessarily placed there to protect those areas from rain. That's a secondary benefit. Evaporation is the main reason. These tarps help keep moisture in. If these areas are left uncovered, critical moisture will escape through evaporation, causing dry, cracking soil. Remember Lesson 2? That lesson talked about mound and home plate care. Before you rehydrate these areas, you'll need to perform any routine repairs that we described in Lesson 2. Then you can finish groom and apply water as described in that lesson. When the areas have had time to set up and stabilize after watering, you can cover them with tarps to retain the moisture. During batting practice on game day, you'll need to remove those tarps. You can still reduce evaporation by using hitting mats and pitching mats to help retain moisture.
All right, so during the course of the day after you've repaired your mound and home plate area, either you want to cover it up with the tarp to hold the moisture in or continuously rehydrate it if you're on the facility's property and can do that and have the wherewithal, meaning you've got access to water that you can continue to put water on top of the mound and home plate area. So in our situation we do, but we also have tarps. We had the home plate area open for a little while we were working on baselines, so we're going to go back and rehydrate this. When we're finished, we'll cover it back up and it'll hold that moisture beautifully then until game time.
Many of our techniques are coming together. Remember Lesson 4 and grooming the baselines? When you have finished dragging the baselines, you'll want to give them a good amount of water. You'll want to add water before you chalk or paint your foul lines. There are a couple of reasons. First, spraying water on your freshly chalked lines will risk ruining your clean lines. Secondly, chalk will absorb some moisture from the infield, and that will help glue it to the infield, giving you a longer lasting line. If you're painting your lines, adding moisture first helps make sure your paint sprayer doesn't blow soil around as you paint.
All right, with our baselines now groomed and ready to go, before we put the chalk down, if we want to put any kind of appreciable moisture and build it up in these baselines, we'll use this time now before we put the chalk down or before we paint the foul lines on the infield skin. We'll load up with water on it, and then we can come back later after this baseline is set up a little bit and put the chalk line or paint line down. It's our only chance to really load up with water. Once we put the lines down, it's a lot tougher to get any kind of appreciable water on here. So if you can, you want to delay putting your chalk lines or paint lines down until as late as possible, if you have that luxury. If you're doing multiple fields in a day, you don't have that kind of luxury. But if you do, hold off as late as you can and use that time to build up the moisture in the baselines, just like we do on the infield skin.
When you can, give your infield skin a good soaking at night. That's assuming rain is not forecasted for the next day. Soaking your field at night gives you the best chance for water to percolate through the soil without evaporation. Be aware of winds that can give you irregular distribution if you're using a sprinkler. Other than rain, a person watering with a handheld hose is the best option. So, how much water should you be putting down? Tough question with no easy answer. The rule of thumb is to use more water when it's a windy day that's hot and sunny with dry air and low humidity. You should use less water when it's the opposite, a cloudy day with only light breezes and cooler temperatures. Timing of the next game is also a factor, so use less water if your next game is less than 4 hours away. This is the real art of groundskeeping. Just adapt to the ever-changing conditions, hour to hour, day to day. Watering your field should be as close to being like rainfall as possible, so you don't disturb your freshly groomed field. To achieve that, you'll need a light touch. Always start with the areas furthest away. Standing on the inner grass, spray towards the outfield, rocking back and forth with the nozzle. This jiggling will break the water down to finer droplets. By starting with the areas furthest away, you'll allow a fine mist to fall all across the infield. When you get to the areas closer to you, you'll only need a fog, so widen out your stream so you don't over-apply.
All right, another tip on watering. You'll notice here that I'm shooting the back portion of the infield first. The reason that is in order to get my water back there, I'm going to have to shoot it all the way across the expanse of the infield skin. Water is going to fall off this stream as it's going towards the back side, so water's already going to be being applied to this. If I was to water this front part first to where I want it to be and then try and water the back, it's going to end up being overwatered by the time I get finished with the back because more water is going to fall off as I'm watering the back portion of the infield. So we start from the back first and then come back closer to us and cover the area in front of us before we move on to the next section. Just like this. As you can see, I'm making this water dance across that surface, not trying to beat the infield down, but allowing this water to dance like rain, working my way from the back towards the front. In windy situations, you'll really have to learn how to play the wind and possibly sometimes use different quick coupler locations in order to achieve your even watering pattern.
When it comes to watering just before game time, it can be a little tricky. Ideally, you'll water heavily early on game day and then water lighter closer to game time. If you don't have that luxury, you'll need to pay close attention to the weather conditions to help you determine how much to apply. Scratching your shoe into the surface is another way to get a feel for how much water your infield can take. There are some general tips you should be aware of when watering your infield so players have the best field possible. Water home plate first so that soil has plenty of time to set up. Avoid getting water on the infield grass. Wet grass at game time can make ground balls slippery for fielders. Don't drag your hose across the infield skin. That will just compromise your finely groomed infield. And when you're done watering from the infield grass, drain the hose behind the mound. That's the area that's least likely to get a ground ball.
All right, when watering the infield, sometimes if you don't have the pressure to be able to shoot all the way across the infield, sometimes you've got to walk out onto the infield to shoot across. And if you have to go far enough, you might need an assistant with you to help carry the hose so that it doesn't scrape the finely groomed infield. So make sure that person is keeping an eye on that hose between the operator, myself, and where he is to make sure that that area of hose does not touch the ground. And this is done again to protect the infield from getting all scuffed up from the hose dragging on the infield. Finally, the other thing is, if this is a pre-game water just before game time, the last thing the players want is wet grass in front of them, because the ball could come skipping through there on a ground ball, the ball gets wet, the player grabs the ball to make the play, and it's so slippery when he tries to throw the ball it slips out of his hands. All right, so when we're watering the infield, when we're watering the baselines, we're always watering close to the edge of the infield grass, shooting away from the infield grass. It's okay if the water in the foul territory gets onto the grass or gets out onto the outfield grass. It's the infield grass that's critical, because that's where the real bang-bang plays are going to happen, where the player's got to be quick, get the ball, have a good handle on it, and make the play. Okay, so let's try and keep the infield grass as dry as possible.
You made it! That's what you need to know about managing moisture on your field. Moisture good, evaporation bad. Of course, there's more to it than that, so take the pop quiz to make sure you've picked up all the finer points. And since this is the end of the lesson, now is a great time to go back and review previous sections and pop quizzes before you move on to another lesson.